Today is the second in our series about Life 2.0, moving up, upgrading, a better version. We're making progress. The Methodist doctrine of perfection. We're moving forward in our faith. Last week we talked about how you begin a year. You got to what's the end in mind before you begin. Today we're going to look at a world that has so much change in it. How can we navigate through life when there's so much change around? What has God taught us about that? You have an outline, if you'll please take it, and we'll follow along. The scriptures are listed there in the outline. Father, may we discover the joy of moving on in our faith, moving toward perfection, as Mr. Wesley said, and we know our compass to lead us. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, this is a day in which we live in a world of change. I don't have to spend much time reminding you of that. Things have changed so rapidly in the last 5 years, the last 10 years, the last 50 years. If you read this passage in Ecclesiastes, I'm not going to read it all, but he just lists for us the different times of life. There's a time to plant, a time to harvest, a time to heal, and a time to kill, a time to tear down and to build, a time to grieve, a time to dance, a time to embrace, a time to turn away. In other words, he just lists a whole litany of things of how life is so different and how life can be constantly changing. In Psalm 37, David said, "Once I was young, but now I'm old." The older we get, the more we see and experience change. I don't have to say a lot about change, but we experience that. I've got one of these up here. Have you got one of these cell phones? How many of you have used a cell phone sometime in the last month? Just raise your hand. If you've used a cell phone, how many of you used one 15 years ago? This is a whole new different age in which we live. We're all buying computers. Look what's happening in the whole age of computers just in the past few years. When you begin to look at how things have changed. If you'd have told me 15 years ago that you would stand in line to pay $4 for a cup of coffee, I'd have said you're crazy. And yet all around town you see that happening today. Someone has put it into a perspective that I can understand. Follow this a minute. Said if you looked at the last 3,000 years and compared it to a clock of 60 minutes, you would see that in the last 3,000 years, most of the change has come in the last 9 minutes. Because 9 minutes ago, the printing press was discovered. 3 minutes ago, the telegraph, phonograph, trains. 2 minutes ago, the telephone, automobiles, radio, airplanes. Television came just 10 seconds ago. The computer, 4 seconds ago. Satellites and laser beams in less than 2 seconds ago. We today are living at the very pinnacle of change that has come. If you take that same scale of 1 hour and just look at one area, medicine, look what's happening in medicine. For 59 minutes, very little developed in medical terms. 1 minute ago, antibiotics were occurred. 10 seconds ago, open heart surgery. In fact, most of the advancements in medicine have come in the last 4 seconds. Do you realize that if you've taken any medicine, 85% of all the medicine being used today wasn't even discovered 15 years ago? Things are different. This is an age of change. 100 years ago, people worked out in the field and they worked hard. And today, most of us work with our minds more than we do our hands. You see, 100 years ago, when a man or a woman finished work, they needed rest. Today, when you finish work, you need exercise. I mean, it's a whole different world. We live in a world that's changing. The second point I want to make is that fortunately, something doesn't change. Someone, and that's God. He remains constant and unchanging. You read a moment ago in the book of Malachi, he said, "I am the Lord, I do not change." If everything was constantly changing, life would be a merry-go-round of meaningless activity. What can I focus on that does not change? In fact, in the book of Revelation, he said, "I'm the Alpha and the Omega." That's the first and last letters of the Greek alphabet. He said, "The beginning and the end, I am the one who is, who always was, and who is still to come." And you've already heard quoted twice this morning from this pulpit from Hebrews. Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. The love and forgiveness of Jesus, the compassion of Jesus, the plans of God, the providence of God, the faithfulness of God, it never changes. And look at Numbers 23. That promises us that when God makes a promise, that doesn't change. You see, God wasn't a man. He said that, has He ever promised and not carried it through? He's never spoken and failed to act. God is totally the same in terms of His promises and His forgiveness and His faithfulness. And what He says never changes. So let me ask a question. As a church family and as an individual, as a Methodist who is trying to move on towards what God has called me to be, as Wesley said, to perfection, how do I do that? I need to stay focused. I need some kind of compass. How can I navigate? Here's the problem. Listen, we get mixed up what is changing and what is changeless. And we begin to try to change some things that don't change, and we refuse to change in areas that we need to change. And that's a delicate balance. How do we do that? The third point. God's given us His Word, His Bible, to be our compass for navigating the changes in life. How can I know where truth is? How can I know what's right and what's wrong? How can I navigate through change? That's a compass. Now, compass is truth. You can't fool this compass. I can turn it and twist it and do other ways, but it always comes up that north is pointing the same way. I can put it under the pulpit, I can trick it, I can talk about it, but this compass is always pointing true north. And if you're a pilot, if you're a scout, if you're out somewhere hunting, you better have one of these with you, or else you can get disoriented and never find your way back. The compass, this is God's Word. It is here to guide us. Look what the psalmist David said, Psalm 119, guide my steps by your word. And again in Psalm 119, he said, look, I'm a foreigner here on earth. I need the guidance of your commandments. We need God's guidance. Now, from the beginning of time, John Wesley said, hey, Methodists ought to be a people of one book. In the Old Testament, David said, hey, the lamp, the Bible is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. Young Paul said to young Timothy, look, remember the scriptures that you learned them at your mother and your grandmother's knee. That's your compass for life. Now, what we need is to be sure that we follow that. There was a man who was up in Vermont, and he was traveling in a rural area, and he became disoriented. He was lost. And he stopped and he asked a man beside the road, he said, hey, I'm lost, can you help me? The man said, sure, I'll be glad to help you. Do you know where you are? He said, sure, I just saw the sign, and he named the town near where he was. He said, well, let me ask you, do you know where you're going? He said, sure, I know where I'm going, and he told him the town. He said, well, let me tell you something, fellow up here in Vermont. If a man knows where he is and where he's going, he's not lost, he just needs some directions. Now, we know pretty well where we are. Last week we talked about where we're going. What we need are the directions to get us there. And it's this book, because this book is truth. Years ago, the Pony Express is the way mail was carried. And there were strict rules by which a cowboy could carry the mail. In fact, they carried no weight on the horse. On the saddlebags, they would just carry the letters. They would ride 50 miles and pass off the mail to another carrier who would carry it another 50 miles. Now, what's interesting is a cowboy would wear the lightest clothing, never put anything in his saddlebags. But you know what was interesting? When the Pony Express started, there was one thing that was required for every cowboy to carry, and that was a Bible. It was called, quote, standard equipment. And it was the heaviest thing that they carried, but they carried it because they were told they needed it. I hope the Bible's standard equipment. I hope this compass, I hope we have it. You might have a compass in your car. You might look up at your rear view mirror, and there might be a little compass there. Compasses help us get to where we're going. This is God's game plan. It is God's roadmap. This is His directions of what to do. So let me just ask a question. What do we do about it? 3 simple things, if you would follow with me. Number 1, we must listen to God's Word. And we as a church are going to place a greater emphasis this year more than ever on learning, listening to God's Word. Bible studies, small groups, a personal growth plan by which each of us will make systematic study of God's Word. You can read the passage in Ephesians, the 4th chapter. He talks about there of how we no longer need to change our minds of what we believe. When people lie to us, if we know God's Word, he says, if someone has obviously lied to us, they can make the lie sound like truth, but the Bible will protect us from that. You see, the reason we need to listen to this Word is that it is truth. I got an interesting thing the other day. It's an evangelistic track. It's by the son of Montgomery O'Hare. He says that when he was a little boy, she told him, hey, the thing in life, you got to find pleasure. She said you can find it anywhere you want. It could be in sex, it could be in alcohol, it could be in drugs. And you remember he says it was his mother who in 1963 led the charge to take Bible reading out of school. And he said, I fell for that. And he said, as a young man, I tried to make my life meaningful for something. And he said, it wasn't going anywhere. He said, when I was 29 years old, I was drinking a quart of vodka a day. I was experimenting with drugs. I'd done everything in sex. But somehow, my mother had lied to me. That wasn't bringing me happiness. And so he said that on January the 25th, 1980, he went down to a newsstand in San Francisco and asked for a Bible. The man found one under some pornographic literature, and he laughed at him. He said, I ain't sold one of these in years. And he gave it to him at a discount. And William Murray went and started reading it. And it changed his life. You know what he said? I discovered truth. And he committed himself to the truth of God's Word. And today, this is the William J. Murray Evangelistic Association in Washington, D.C., diametrically opposed to the way he was raised because he learned that this book is truth. And he wanted to convince people, unlike his mother, to what truth is. Do you know why we need to listen to this book? This is light. This is truth. This is God's Word for us for today. We listen to it. But secondly, not only do we listen to it, but we must study it. Now, I wish I could just say if you came and somehow you could take a drink and the Bible would be infused to you. You have to study it, and you have to study it systematically. It takes time, it takes discipline, it takes effort, but we have to study it. Now, just a word about studying the Bible. When you study the Bible, don't make up your mind on an issue and then go to the Bible and try to prove it. That's where a lot of people study the Bible. Now, I know what I believe. Let me see if I can find something in here to support it. Hear me carefully. You can support most anything by the Bible if you take it out of context. If you just take it out of context. As somebody told me one time, you can prove they played tennis in the Bible. It says David served in Solomon's court. And if you want to just, you can prove most anything. Baseball players like to say baseball was in the Bible. Genesis 1:1. It says in the big inning. Now, if you want to take the Bible, you can prove most anything on any side of the issue. There was a boy that wanted a car when he turned 16. And more than anything, he wanted a car. And when his 16th birthday came, he saw no evidence of a car. And finally, he got mad at his dad and said, where's my car? He said, what do you mean? He said, I wanted a car when I turned 16. Why didn't I get it? He said, there are 3 reasons. Number 1 is your grades are not good enough. Number 2 is you don't go to church and read your Bible. And number 3, you got long hair. If you'll do something about those 3 things, I'll get you a car. Well, that boy went to work. In about 6 months, he came back to his dad and he said, I'm ready for my car. He said, okay, tell me why. He said, well, look at my grades, straight A's. He said, that's good. Look at my attendance at church and reading the Bible. Hadn't missed a Sunday. I read the Bible every day. He said, that's good. But he said, there's still one thing, son. You got long hair. You hadn't done anything about that. Boy said, Daddy, you told me to read the Bible. That's what I've been doing. And I read in the Bible that Jesus had long hair. He said, yeah, but if you keep reading, son, you'll find also that he walked everywhere that he went. Now, you can take any side of the issue. Studying the Bible isn't finding passages that would support, but it's beginning with truth and then allowing it to change my life. Look at what Joshua said. Study this book of law continually. Meditate on it day and night, and be sure to obey all that's written in it. And in Psalm 1:3, he talks about the man who is good and right. He said, his delight is in the law of the Lord. On his law he meditates day and night. And the psalmist David said, I'll study your commandments. I'll reflect on your ways. I'll delight in your principles and not forget your word. You see, the purpose of the Bible, listen, is not just to inform, but it's to transform us. It's not just to substantiate what we believe, it's to change our way of believing when we study it. And it's the greatest source of truth we have. An interesting thing occurred in Washington, D.C. just a few months ago. I don't know if you've ever been down to the big metro station in Washington where all the trains converge. And there was a young boy who was in blue jeans and a t-shirt, and he had on a Washington Nationals baseball cap, and he just went down in the big area there, the metro of Washington, and he had a violin, and he took out the violin. He took out the case, and you've seen them do this. They put the case out there, and he put about $17 of seed money in it, and he took his violin and he started playing. Played marvelous, beautiful music. Thousands and thousands of people came by, but none of them stopped to listen. In fact, only a few dropped in some money. At the end of about 3 hours, he had $32, and he'd put in $17. Nobody paid much attention to him. You know who he was? One of the world-renowned violinists, Joshua Bell. The violin he was playing was a Stradivarius, valued at over $3 million. You see, 2 nights before, he had played to a sellout crowd at the Boston Symphony Hall, where the cheapest ticket in the grandstands was $200, and people had paid thousands of dollars. Actually, the Washington Post asked him to do it. They were running an experiment to see, do the people of Washington recognize value in the commonplaces of life? And they were so busy in the metro station at Washington that they had an opportunity to hear the world's finest violinist. I mean, they could have gone up and got his autograph. They could have touched a $3 million violin, but nobody paid any attention. Sort of like this book. Barna just reported that in America, 81% of the people of America think this is the greatest book that's ever been written. But only about 21% read it at least a couple of times during the month. Now, I want to say as a church, we are committed to not just listening to, but to studying and to learning truth from God's Word. We're not here to make the Bible say what we think. Dr. Bruce Metzger, who was a professor at Princeton and was one of the translators of one of the modern translations, they asked him, said, when you come to the passage in John 14:6 where it says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, no man comes to the Father but by me, you're going to change that, aren't you? We know that's not true today. He said, it's not my task to change it. It's my task to translate it. They said, but you know, we've gone beyond that. He said, my task is to translate the Bible because it is truth, and it'll be translated for what it says. We study. We don't make up our mind and find something to support us. We begin, this is God's truth. Now, what does that mean? So that leads to the third point. It means that we obey. We don't just listen. We don't just study, but we obey God's Word. Hebrews 4:2 says it's sharper than the sharpest knife. It cuts deep into the innermost thoughts and desires. There's a fascinating passage here in James 1. Read it. What James says is, you don't go and look in a mirror And when you look at the mirror, you see how you are, then you get distracted and you walk off without doing something about it. Let me use maybe a modern translation. If you're a man and you're shaving in front of the mirror and you're half through shaving and the phone rings, you don't go off and then go through the day just half shaven. Or if you're a woman and you're putting on your makeup and you're halfway through and you get distracted, so you're going through the day just with half your face made up. He said, you look pretty funny. He said, what you're doing with the Bible is you're looking at it, it's showing you, but you're not finishing. You're not doing what he's asked you to do to make the change. Studying the Bible means that it brings change in my life. The purpose of the Bible is not just inspiration and information, it is transformation. And somebody's well said that one day of obedience is worth more than 1 year of study. Studying is good, hear me. But the purpose is that it leads to obedience. The biggest tragedy ever occurred in the nuclear reactor business occurred at Chernobyl. It was about 21 years ago in Russia. Just recently, the University of Pacific Review told what happened there in Russia that time. Now this is scary, but it's so appropriate to what we do with the Bible. Let me just read it. There were 2 electrical engineers in the control room that night, and they were just sort of playing around. They wanted to perform really an unauthorized experiment. They wanted to see how long a turbine could freewheel if they took the power off of it. Now, taking the power off that kind of a nuclear reactor is dangerous and difficult because the reactors become very unstable in the low ranges. And in order to get the reactor down to that kind of power, they had to perform a test. And here's what happened. There were 6 different computer voices that said to them, stop, dangerous, go no further. But they were interested in their unauthorized experiment to see what would happen, and they ignored the warnings and kept up the experiment. And then you remember what happened. The worst nuclear disaster in the history of mankind. Watch, stop, don't go any further, dangerous, but they paid no attention. This book is God's word to us. Stop, dangerous, don't go any further. Now ignore it, and you're in for a disaster. Obey it, and it can be a power unparalleled if we're willing to obey it. I want to listen, I want to study, and I want to obey. In fact, when Paul wrote to Timothy, he describes the Bible like a tracing tablet. You put the original up there and you put your life up against it and trace in your life according to what it says. Obeying this is God's word. This is my life, I'm going to put it up against it. And from that, I will discover what's right, what's wrong, and what's truth. You can't fool this compass. You can't fool it. You can't fool this compass because it's truth. And it's God's unchanging word to help us navigate through all the change that confronts us. Move our heads together. In just a moment of reflection, would you make a commitment that you will listen and study and obey God's word every day? I'm just going to say for the next week, would you just make that commitment? And if you're already doing that, maybe for the next month or for this year. I don't know how God would deal with your life right now. But would you just make a commitment? Father, I'm going to listen. When it says stop, I'm going to stop. I'm going to study it. I'm going to obey it.